So today I want to confirm with you, in case you do not know, the pardon of Datuk Sri Najib was not on the basis, I'm sorry I committed this offense, I now throw myself on your feet and I ask for forgiveness and therefore pardon. That's not Datuk Sri Najib's pardon. His pardon, I have it here if you want to have a look at it. This is the first volume, there are 3. He said, the court failed me, I was not given a fair trial, which includes, of course, the appeal. Because I was not treated fairly. I have a right to be pardoned from day one. I've got no business being in jail even for 1 day. That was what his argument is. So this question about you must serve 3 years, 4 years before you see the daylight of a pardon is utter nonsense. Because even the legislation does not provide that. The legislation says, the regulation of the prison says, you have got the right to mount a pardon as soon as practicable. So this story about 3-4 years, what you've been hearing, you can dismiss it as the utter nonsense. But more importantly, the concept that when a person is handed down a sentence, he must not walk out of the court feeling that justice was not done on him. Because another person got away with 2 years. This was a landmark case in England. That demonstrates to you the utilization of the concept of mercy, the utilization of the concept of avoidance of the sense of injustice in a court of law. But we're not dealing with a court of law, because court of law has got its own set of problems, and we now deal with when the process of justice ends. The whole justice system has ended on a person. This is where mercy begins. And mercy begins with the mechanism of pardon. And it is for that reason we cannot turn the mechanism of pardon into another court, where you can take the young Di-Pertuan Agong for a judicial review and bandy about his decision from the High Court, then go on to the Appellate Court of Appeal, discuss how wrong he was, how right he was, how silly he was, and so on, and then go on again to the Federal Court. So the entire royal prerogative becomes a joke. Our system, just like England, has devised a method called the royal pardon. A royal prerogative in all the cases that have decided on pardon is a situation where it is non-reviewable. The good reason, apart from what I've just said, is this: that it provides the young Di-Pertuan Agong with the comfort that he can decide on based on any parameter, as long as he satisfies his conscience that this man deserves the pardon.
I said that we have to be looking at the provisions of the Federal Constitution. So why do we have to look at it? Because the powers of pardon comes under Article 42 of the Federal Constitution. Under Article 42 of the Federal Constitution, it uses the word power. It doesn't use the word prerogative. Neither does it use the word discretion. So why do we say, okay, that the power of the king, okay, is not necessarily the same as having a discretion to grant pardon in any way he so wishes? It is because he may have the power, sure, the power is given to him. That's the source of power comes from the Federal Constitution. But the question is whether or not power equates discretion. And when we cross-refer that to Article 40 of the Federal Constitution, you will see that there are only 4 instances, okay, where the king can exercise his discretion. Number 1, when he's actually appointing the Prime Minister. Second, when he's actually thinking about dissolution of Parliament. And number 3, I think it is requiring a meeting of the Conference of Rulers over the powers of the royal houses. And the fourth category is any other case mentioned in the Constitution. So what are the other cases mentioned in the Constitution, okay, that provides the king with the discretion when he's making a decision? I think some instances I can think of, if I'm not mistaken, Prof. Shah, would be Article 55 and also probably Article 150 on the proclamation of emergency. To a certain extent, I think there is some discretion that has been given to the king, okay, when he is trying to come to a decision. But nowhere in Article 40, sub 2, okay, on the issue on the exercise of discretion, is there stated that pardon comes under that particular category. So that is the reason why, for me, my interpretation of Article 42 is that, yes, king has the power, but no, he doesn't have the discretion. So, go back to Article 40. Then if he has the power but doesn't have the discretion, then what does he do? Then Article 40 actually says, well, if he's actually exercising his power, what he would have to do is, he would have to listen to the advice, he would have to consider the advice, and upon considering the advice, he would have to act in accordance with that advice. That is very clearly stated under Article 40, sub 1A, if I'm not mistaken. Article 40, yeah, sub 1A. So, I think that for me, the issue of the interpretation of Article 42 and Article 40 is something that has been around for quite some time. I'm not the first person to have raised it. I think many people have raised it before. So the question of whether or not we are going to be interpreting it this way, or whether we are interpreting it correctly or wrongly, I believe, okay, is just a matter of difference of opinion. There is no need for me to go back to the law school.
May I go back to England? Even in England, actually, there are cases where prerogative has been subjected to some control, but the courts have been very cautious. They say, if politics is involved, if international relations are involved, if policy is involved along with politics, national security, the courts will stay away because the executive is the best judge of these things. But if they have suspicion that abuse or personal factors were involved, then the courts will interfere. In India, it's the same way, actually. In the case of GCHQ, or what is called the Council of Civil Service Union versus the Minister for the Civil Service, this Council of Civil Service Union used to work, was a union in what was called General Communication Headquarters. It's not General Communications, it's a spy network. They call it General Communications. So they wanted to set up a union at the GCHQ. The Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was also the Minister for the Civil Service. She objected and said, security is involved. If you have a union, it will result in leakage of information. Ultimately, the House of Lords decided in her favor. But the court made it very clear that though security is the government's concern, the minister must convince the courts that security is indeed involved. At least some evidence must be put forward to indicate that security was involved. Even a toehold of information will do. Just a little bit of information, but the government must convince. The government cannot expect the courts to treat the government's word as if it is the law.